After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, even Thanksgiving dinner has become unaffordable. Food banks across the country are overwhelmed. With Thanksgiving approaching, some food banks have made the tough decision of cutting back on distributing food because they just don't have enough to go around. The Liberals' carbon taxes have driven up the cost of Thanksgiving staples like potatoes by 77%. Will this Prime Minister reverse this 77% hike on Thanksgiving food before Thanksgiving, as he promised? Yes or no?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservative member wants to see grocery prices lowered, I hope that she asks her leader why it is that the Conservatives continue to delay the legislation that is before this House. In fact, just this morning, I was so pleased to see the member for Mission Misquith Fraser Canyon say that he supports Bill C-56. And I wonder if other Conservatives can convince their leader to support this bill, because Canadians are counting on all of us in this House to help stabilize grocery prices.
L'honorable député de Haldeman-Norfolk.
Canadians are counting on immediate relief before Thanksgiving. People are rationing food across this country. According to Food Banks Canada, people are making impossible choices between paying their rent or putting food on the table for their families. This Liberal-NDP government continues their inflationary spending, which has caused grocery prices to increase by 94%, as in the case with lettuce. Wow. Canadians are realizing that this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost.
That's right.
Will this Prime Minister keep his promise and reverse his punishing food price hikes by Thanksgiving?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, there are important measures that can be immediately implemented in order to help Canadians. But the problem is what we hear from the Conservatives are very sincere concerns in question period. But then when it comes time to vote, Mr. Speaker, when it comes time to debate legislation, what we're seeing are procedural delay tactics and Conservatives voting against the interests of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I would urge everybody in this House to act in order to support Canadians, stabilize prices, and get more homes built in this country.
L'honorable député de Dufferin-Caledon.
This will not be a happy Thanksgiving for many Canadian families because food prices are absolutely out of control. And the NDP leader just said that food inflation has outpaced inflation over the last 20 months, which is coincidentally the length of the Liberal-NDP coalition. What could be happening, Mr. Speaker? But the sad fact is this: Canadian families are going to have to make the hard choice: feed their family or pay their rent. Will the Prime Minister finally recognize the damage he's done to Canada, keep his promise so they have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
Hear, hear, hear. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et comme je dis...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, we're taking concrete steps. They're on the table right here in the House. And I don't understand how the Conservatives can pretend to be sincere about their concern for Canadians while at the same time they're using procedural tactics to try to prevent us from helping Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's beyond me. If the Conservatives want to be there for Canadians, well, they should pull up their socks and get down to work and help us help Canadians.
L'honorable député de Dufferin-Caledon.
Mr. Speaker, only a party whose leader said, "I admire the basic dictatorship of China," would say legitimate debate about a government piece of legislation is so inconvenient and an obstruction. That is a disgraceful comment and an opinion. But it's not a surprise from these Liberals whose leader admires the basic dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, everything they've done has done nothing to improve food affordability. After 8 long years of this Liberal government, Canadians can't pay for food. Will the Prime Minister keep his promise so Canadians can have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Conservatives can then explain in debate what it is about cutting GST on the construction of new homes that they actually disagree with. What is it about strengthening competition laws to stabilize grocery prices here in Canada that they disagree with? Because I haven't heard a single argument in debate that has convinced any Canadian in this country that we shouldn't proceed with those measures, Mr. Speaker. And if the Conservatives want to help Canadians, they should be sincere in their actions. They should vote in the interests of Canadians.
L'honorable député de Mégantic.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, we would have voted for scrapping the carbon tax, which would have immediately affected all Canadians' pocketbooks. But instead, the Prime Minister made a big media show of saying he had brought together the food giants so that Canadians could afford their Thanksgiving dinners. He made that promise to Canadians, but food prices have increased, potatoes by 67% and so on. There's only 4 days left to bring prices down in time for Thanksgiving. After 8 years of empty promises, will he or won't he keep his promise to make Thanksgiving dinner affordable? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are very selective in choosing their facts. But one thing they never talk about is the fact that what is driving up food prices is also climate change, because this year we had the worst harvests in almost all of Quebec and Canada, in all the regions. And it's so important to put a price on pollution and to combat climate change. And if there's one group who knows that, it's farmers. So we want to help farmers and Canadians. And if they do, they should be supporting our efforts to fight climate change. The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, people in Chambly don't know how they're going to pay for their Thanksgiving turkey. Meanwhile, the leader of the Bloc Liberal coalition thinks he's the head of Quebec diplomacy, spending thousands of dollars on travel and greenhouse gas emissions to attend fancy cocktail parties to talk about what? The cost of living, rising rents, violence in Montreal, carbon tax hikes? No, he went to talk about independence. If you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it. Will the Prime Minister call his Bloc ambassador back home and tell him how he's going to keep his promise to lower food prices in time for Thanksgiving? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think today's debate requires a bit of seriousness from the Conservatives. We're talking about the challenges Quebecers and Canadians are facing. The cost of living has gone up recently, and today we have taken steps. We have legislation to help Canadians lower the cost of rent and groceries, but the Conservatives are voting against everything we do, everything to fight climate change and so on. They should support C-56 so that we can stabilize grocery prices, Mr. Speaker.